Welcome to Executive Protection Insights. I'm Liam. A few years ago, I was sitting in a hotel room the night before a CEO movement when my inbox started filling up. One email came from our local security provider, another came from the corporate security team, then one from a risk intelligence platform we subscribe to, then an embassy advisory. By the time I finished dinner, I had almost 100 pages of intelligence sitting on my laptop. I did what every protection professional does. I started reading. Political updates, crime reports, weather, transportation, economic news, regional developments, election analysis, labor disputes, pages and pages of information. About 45 minutes later, I stopped reading, leaned back in my chair and asked myself a question. What in everything I've just read actually changes tomorrow's operation? The answer was almost nothing. Now, before you misunderstand me, all that information had value. It helped me understand the environment. It gave me context. Context is important, but context doesn't always change your plan. That's something I wish I'd understood much earlier in my career. When I was a younger advance agent, I thought my job was to collect as much information as possible. The thicker the advance package became, the more confident I felt. If I had country reports, crime statistics, weather forecasts, medical information, hotel surveys, route reconnaissance, photographs, embassy contacts, and intelligence reports all in one binder, I thought I was ready for anything. Experience taught me something different. Preparation isn't measured by how much information you collect. It's measured by how quickly you can identify the information that actually changes your operation. That's a huge difference. The advanced package is your operational playbook. Protective intelligence is what continuously validates or changes that playbook. One doesn't replace the other. They're designed to work together. If your intelligence never changes your advanced package, you have to ask yourself whether you're collecting useful intelligence. At the same time, if every new headline causes you to redesign your entire operation, you're probably reacting instead of analyzing. Finding that balance takes experience. I remember an operation in South America several years ago. We'd spent almost a week preparing for the principal's arrival. The hotel had been advanced. Every route had been driven multiple times. The venue surveys were complete. Drivers had been interviewed. Hospitals visited. Emergency contacts confirmed. The advance package was finished. I remember thinking this was one of the smoothest preparations we'd ever done. The evening before the movement, I went downstairs to have dinner in the hotel restaurant. Nothing formal, just trying to disconnect for an hour before another early morning. The concierge walked over while I was eating. He asked where we'd be going the next morning. I told him the location. He smiled politely and said something that immediately got my attention. You probably don't want to use the main avenue tomorrow. That was it. One sentence. I asked him why. He looked surprised that I didn't already know. There'll be demonstrations all day. I thanked him, finished dinner, and went straight back upstairs. Within minutes, I started checking every local source I could find. Sure enough, the teachers' union had announced a nationwide protest. The announcement had been made only a couple of days earlier. It wasn't on the international news. It wasn't highlighted in any of the intelligence reports I'd received. It wasn't considered significant enough for most of the commercial intelligence providers, but it was very significant for us because 50,000 people were expected to march directly across our primary route. Nothing about the advance package had been wrong. It simply needed to be updated. Within an hour, we had new routes, new ETAs, new departure times. The opening vehicle would now approach the venue from the opposite direction. The support vehicle would stage in a different location. Even the driver's briefing changed. The next morning, the convoy moved exactly as planned. The principal never saw the demonstration, never knew it existed. And that's exactly the point. People often ask me what protective intelligence actually is. My answer usually surprises them. Protective intelligence isn't about predicting the future. It's about reducing uncertainty. Every piece of intelligence should answer one question. Does this change my operation? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Both answers are valuable. Young agents often think intelligence is only useful when it identifies a new threat. I disagree. Some of the best intelligence I've ever received simply confirmed that nothing had changed. That confirmation allowed us to execute the original plan with confidence. That's still intelligence, and that's still valuable. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see today is people relying entirely on technology. Don't get me wrong, I love technology. I use intelligence platforms, government advisories, weather services, flight tracking, traffic monitoring, open source intelligence, social media monitoring. They're all excellent tools, but they're still just tools. The best intelligence source I've ever worked with wasn't an expensive platform. It was a local driver. His name was Carlos. He'd been driving executives around that city for nearly 25 years. He knew every shortcut, every construction project, every neighborhood, every traffic pattern. More importantly, he knew the city behaved differently depending on the day. One afternoon, we were reviewing the following day's movements. Everything looked perfect. Primary route, alternate route, travel times, police support, no issues. Carlos quietly looked at the map for a few seconds, then pointed at one intersection. I wouldn't go through there tomorrow. I asked why. He shrugged. Friday. I remember laughing. What happens on Friday? He smiled. The market. That's all he said. The market. He explained that every Friday morning, hundreds of vendors arrived before sunrise. Delivery trucks blocked half the streets. Customers parked wherever they could find space. Police stopped directing traffic because there simply wasn't enough room. Google Maps couldn't tell me that. Traffic software didn't know that. The intelligence reports certainly didn't mention it. But Carlos knew, because he'd driven through that intersection every Friday for 25 years. That conversation with Carlos stayed with me long after the operation was over. Not because he discovered some major security threat. He hadn't. He'd simply reminded me that there's a difference between information and understanding. Information tells you a road exists. Understanding tells you how that road behaves. And in executive protection, behavior is often more important than statistics. That's one of the reasons I always try to spend as much time as possible with local people during an advance. Not because they're intelligence analysts, because they live the operation every single day. I've learned more over coffee with hotel security managers than I have reading some intelligence reports. I've learned more sitting in the front seat of a local driver's vehicle than I have looking at satellite imagery. I've learned more walking a venue with a maintenance supervisor than I have reading the architect's floor plans. Those conversations rarely start with security. They usually start with something completely ordinary. How long have you worked here? When does this entrance get busy? Which elevator breaks down the most? Do people normally use this parking lot? Simple questions. The answers are often gold. I remember conducting an advance at a manufacturing facility where the client proudly showed us the executive entrance we'd be using. It looked perfect. Secure parking, electronic access control, private reception area, everything you'd want. As we were leaving, one of the maintenance technicians happened to walk by. I asked him a question almost without thinking. Does everyone use this entrance? He smiled. No. I asked which entrance employees preferred. He pointed toward the opposite side of the building. We walked over. It wasn't nearly as impressive. No polished floors, no reception desk. Just a simple employee entrance. But within 5 minutes, we watched hundreds of contractors, delivery drivers, and visitors all using that door. The executive entrance looked secure because almost nobody used it. The employee entrance looked ordinary because everybody used it. That completely changed our thinking about the operation. Not because the threat had changed, because our understanding had. That's what good protective intelligence does. It improves your understanding. It helps you see the operation the way the local environment sees it. I think sometimes our industry overcomplicates intelligence. We talk about geopolitical analysis, threat matrices, risk scoring, predictive assessments. All of those things have their place. But I've always believed executive protection is fundamentally practical. At 7:30 tomorrow morning, my principal is getting into a vehicle. What could affect that movement? That's where I start. Then I work outward. Is there a demonstration, a strike, a sporting event, road construction, flooding, a VIP visit, a religious festival, a local holiday, a farmer's market, a marathon, a school graduation? You'd be amazed how many operations have been disrupted by things that never appear in traditional intelligence reporting. One of my favorite examples happened completely by accident. We were protecting an executive during a multi-day visit overseas. The itinerary was solid. The advance package was complete. Protective intelligence had been updated every evening. Everything looked exactly the way we wanted it. Then during breakfast at the hotel, one of the waiters mentioned there would be fireworks that night for a local celebration. None of us had heard about it. It wasn't because we'd done a poor job. It was simply a very local event. No security concern, no intelligence alert, just fireworks. Most people would have ignored that information. We didn't. Why? Because fireworks create noise. Noise creates confusion. Confusion creates unnecessary emergency calls, road closures, crowds, traffic diversions, people stopping in the middle of the street to watch. Suddenly, something that looked completely unrelated to security became operationally relevant. We adjusted the departure time from dinner by 30 minutes. That was it. 30 minutes. As we drove back toward the hotel, we watched thousands of people walking toward the waterfront where the fireworks were about to begin. Traffic behind us stopped almost completely. Our principal looked out the window and said, "Good thing we're not going that way." He had no idea why we weren't. He didn't need to. The operation had quietly adapted hours earlier because somebody had paid attention. I've always believed that's where executive protection earns its value. Not by reacting faster than everyone else, by making small decisions before they become big problems. There's another lesson I've learned over the years. Protective intelligence has an expiration date. Some information becomes outdated within minutes. Weather changes, flights are delayed, roads close, demonstrations move, accidents happen. That's why I never think of intelligence as something you collect once. It's something you continuously refresh. The advanced package is a living document. Every new piece of intelligence should either validate your plan or improve it. That's exactly how I use advanced work today. The mission stays the same. The hotel advance stays the same. The venue survey stays the same. The medical planning stays the same. But intelligence continues feeding the operation. Maybe today's update changes nothing. Perfect. That means our planning was solid. Maybe tomorrow's update changes one route. Excellent. Now the entire team knows before anyone leaves the hotel. Planning and intelligence aren't competing with each other. They're constantly working together. One creates the plan, the other keeps the plan relevant. That's a lesson I wish someone had taught me 20 years ago. Because early in my career, I spent far too much time trying to collect everything. Today, I spend much more time asking one simple question. What decision will this information help me make? If I can't answer that question, it probably doesn't belong in tomorrow's briefing. Before I finish today's episode, I want to leave you with one thought. The best protective intelligence I've ever received didn't come from a classified report. It didn't come from an expensive software platform. It didn't come from a government bulletin. It came from conversations. A concierge, a driver, a maintenance technician, a waiter, people who understood their environment better than anyone looking at it from thousands of miles away. So the next time you're conducting an international advance, spend a little less time trying to become an expert on the country and a little more time talking to the people who already are. Because intelligence isn't about knowing more. It's about understanding better. And when that understanding becomes part of your advanced package, your routes, your movements, and your decisions, that's when intelligence becomes operational. Until next time, stay sharp, stay prepared, and stay operational.